Douglas Crockford is the author of JavaScript: The Good Parts, a book well known for making us take JavaScript more seriously and start building real applications in it. Before then, JavaScript was this weird sin of a language you tried to avoid in your front ends, and now it's taken over the entirety of the web and many platforms beyond the web as well. React has gone almost everywhere JavaScript has found itself. And with this new change in React, with the move to the server component model, React is pushing boundaries further and really challenging the norms of us as web developers, the same way JavaScript always has. I will continue betting on React for the foreseeable future, and I wanted to take some time to justify why. I recently gave a talk at Reactathon, The Future of React is Us, and I really want to emphasize this point. I think React's biggest strength is its understanding of the community, and the closeness between the React team and the community has never been as deep as it is now. React's partnership with Vercel isn't because Vercel spent a lot of money to convince the React team. It's because React was being pushed further by them than almost anyone else. We've seen similar partnerships between React and the Expo team for years on mobile, and we didn't have much an issue then. It's confusing to me why we do now, but I understand the fear of change. And I think that's what I'm seeing the most of. Fear of change. Especially when we look back at something like Angular 2, which, despite being the right move for the web, hurt a lot of the AngularJS developers at the time. Angular 2 made TypeScript the norm. It moved away from MVC and towards components. It threw away a lot of what AngularJS's code was, and it deprecated a ton of the core features in AngularJS in favor of a better, stronger model that would push not just Angular devs forward, but the web as a whole. Without Angular, it's hard to know if or when we ever would have had TypeScript become the norm. Before it, TypeScript was just a thing Microsoft did internally. After it, TypeScript started becoming the standard that we all expect from every framework and technology we use on the web. Angular's decisions were tough, but they were important. And despite the red wedding, as we now call it, Angular 2 did move the web forward. React is doing something similar now with server components. But there are some key differences I really want to dive into. The single page app model put too much work on the client, and it required us to rebuild both our front ends and our back ends to do things right. We saw technologies like GraphQL catch on because we needed a better way to build relationships between our back ends and front ends as our front ends got more complex. The beauty of the new model is that complexity is now opt-in. You have the ability to start from the server code that is fetching from your database, and instead of returning JSON, you can return HTML. That's the magic of the new React model. It kind of goes back to the old Rails way of doing things, but the HTML you return can also be a client component or a structure of updates, so you only have to re-render from certain points in your application. It does so much more, and it's really made me feel like I have control of when my application converts itself from backend to front. I have a lot of granular ownership now that I never had before. That's always kind of what React did. And that's why I always liked it when I first used it on just the front end. Felt like I got to choose how to compose and architect things. The primitives gave me a lot of power. Unlike AngularJS to Angular though, those old primitives still work. I have an example here where I found an old class component from 2014. And here I grab the author and text information off of those refs, and I do import something here. We'll get to that in a minute. But the point is, I took this old class component, I made two very small changes, and it still works in the new model. It even server renders when I put the use client on here and I mount it inside of a page in Next. This actually works. That do work call, by the way, is a server action. This is the newest alpha that just shipped with the newest Next release. This is very, very early, but I was able to define a server function that only runs on the server and import that in 2014 React code, and it just works. If I open this in the browser, I can type name some content, show you the logs here, post. You saw the name stuff appear there, and then it refreshes because that's the default behavior. But when I go to the console here, you see do work on the server. This printed just on the server, not on the client, because that code just runs on the server, not the client. All of the new patterns work with the old techniques, the old primitives. They took all our code along for the ride. They've taken us at every step. And this is what's so cool about React. Unlike other frameworks and the more risky innovations they tend to take, React hasn't quite played it safe What they have done is maintained support for every core feature React has supported. You can take code from 10 years ago and run it in a brand new React project using all the new patterns, and it will even render on the server. That's insane. There are almost no frameworks with that level of interoperability, and that's what makes this move so impressive. If they are wrong and this isn't the right thing for the web, we can continue maintaining the apps that we built the old way, but this is just one more primitive for us to consider. Previously, React was a single page app model where everything ran on the client, and we had hacks like Next.js, Gatsby, and even Remix that would hydrate the page in its entirety and ship all the same JavaScript to the client, but run it on the server once to get you some HTML before the JS runs. The beauty of this new model is that none of that's true anymore. A lot of the hacks and bad techniques we had come up with to force some level of server and client interoperability are now baked in really good primitives. Most real applications were forced to do something like this anyways. At Twitch, we built a hacky templating system that would get run over by React as soon as it runs. Things like that are just the norm. We've all had to build something to make our pages work better once the React bundles start getting to a certain size. And that's no longer the case. Your code is server first and server only by default now. You choose when things become interactive. And honestly, that's how it always should have been. But sadly, getting that type of adoption would have been impossible before. Because in order for you to limit what goes to the client, you have to own what goes on the server. Next.js proved React developers were ready to start taking over the server. And the React server component model is leaning into the fact that React is both the incumbent, the majority holder of modern web projects and greenfield applications, and using that majority to do a thing no other framework can, help front-end devs get buy-in moving into the backend. Obviously, lots of other front-end frameworks have the ability to interop with and build backend frameworks around them, but none of those frameworks have the level of adoption and buy-in that React does. And the opportunity here is incredible. The buy-in people have on React is being used as a lever to push us towards the server. You don't have to make the move if it doesn't make sense for you or your organization, or you're just not feeling it yet. But if your applications do need this, or you're tired of the old way of loading data and rendering your applications and even just structuring your UIs, this new model is very compelling. And it's hard for me to do anything other than dive right in. It's been so fun to use. I was hesitant at first, but man, we've now built 3, almost 4 production applications with this new model, and I will never be going back. I'm excited for the future, and I'm still so hyped on frameworks like Solid and Svelte. Even Vercel is continuing to bet on Svelte and hiring a whole team with web dev legends to build Svelte out as a strong framework of its own. SvelteKit is very promising too, and it's making a very different bet than server components are. And that's okay. This is part of what's so exciting right now. There are a lot of different ways things go, but React will continue to be a force to reckon with. And the 3rd generation of React is not something to be scared of, it's something to be excited about. And I'm really excited. I'm fortunate enough to have talked with a lot of the core team and heard why these things happened. And it really is just excitement. Sebastian went to Vercel because the future of React was the server and he wanted to see that through. And Meta wasn't the right place to do that. And the new model is incredibly compelling. There are some weird edges and we're still figuring out the pieces, but the puzzle itself is incredible to work with. It feels entirely different to use. The amount of things that exist in the model is greater, but the complexity and the depth of them is much shallower. I am so hyped about this future, and I am happy to still be betting on React. If you're not ready yet, that's fine. These changes are not something you need to do right now in order to stay competent and on top of things as a React developer. But if you are excited about the idea of the new server component model and the app router and all the new frameworks starting to form around this, or even the fact that use server and use client will now be standard bundling techniques that frameworks like Solid can hook into, there's so much here to be excited about. And man, I hope y'all are at least somewhat as excited as me, because the future's bright. And I'm really happy that I bet on React. Thank you guys as always. Peace, nerds.